So hello and welcome to this Get Tourism Ready webinar hosted by Visit Scotland, with 13 days to go to the expected reopening of tourism in Scotland. There are many questions to be answered ahead of that April 26th date, and we have three people who aim to do just that in the next hour. They are Chris Greenwood, who's Senior Tourism Insights Manager for Visit Scotland, Vicki Miller, who's Director of Marketing, and Riddell Graham, Director of Industry and Destination Development at Visit Scotland and Chair of STERG. Now, we'll hear from each individual, then on a panel taking your questions. I'm Bill McFarlane, Chairman of Pink Elephant Communications, here to host the discussion. The programme is being recorded. If you wish to be out of vision, please switch off your camera. Everybody needs to switch off their microphone to make sure we can hear our guests. So let's crack on and hear from the first of the three of them today. And that is Chris Greenwood, who is the Senior Tourism Insights Manager at Visit Scotland. Chris has spent the last year studying how tourism has been affected by COVID-19, how the events industry in Scotland has been impacted, and what tourists are now looking for from a holiday in Scotland. Chris, can you give us your insight into the way the industry has reacted in the last year and what to expect next?
Certainly can, and thank you very much for the opportunity for sharing this information. We have, over the course of the year, obviously seen many unprecedented sort of times and situations, and I think everybody within the tourism industry has found that it's led to a lot of planning and consideration of markets and products. What we have found from a research side of things is that many of our traditional measures of tourism, the Great Britain Tourism Survey and the Office of National Statistics International Passenger Survey, which measures our volume and value, have been unavailable to us. So we've gone to alternate methods that perhaps we hadn't adopted as much in the past, and look towards industry surveys, which I know many of you have participated in the past, and we're very grateful for that, and consumer sentiment surveys. And our focus has very much been on understanding how businesses and consumers are feeling now and in the future, rather than what we historically did was looking backwards as to how tourism performed in the previous year. So that said, I think what I'll do is I'll move on and look at the big picture. So if we look at figures that were released by the United Nations World Tourism Organization, we can see that in 2020, the impact of COVID-19 is very clear. There was a 74% drop in visitor numbers. In 2019, there was about 1.5 billion international visitors that were going around the world, and that fell to 380 million in 2020. And Europe was one of the areas that was impacted significantly by that drop in visitor numbers. In figures that were published during last week in early April, what we had was a continuation of this trend. And I think people will know from news and media that places like Europe and the US are seeing subsequent resurgence of COVID-19 in particular areas, and that's having an impact on reopening of economies and countries in those areas. But what we did see was through the UNWTO measurements that international travel remains weak. And as of the beginning of this year, it's fallen by a further 87% in January 2021 due to those new outbreaks. However, the situation in the UK is obviously much better with the rollout of the vaccine schemes. And we're seeing that the recovery and reopening is taking place firstly down in England, and as Bill said, will be in Scotland in the near future. As of the start of the year, we're still seeing that many destinations have closed to international tourism, and there are restrictions. And of course, this is going to have the repercussions that domestic tourism is going to become even more important as we reopen and recover. But that said, the UNWTO has put a figure of around about 260 million fewer international travellers that would have taken place at the beginning of this year compared to what would normally happen. And it just highlights the importance that tourism has on national, international and local economies. So as I mentioned, we have a number of kind of surveys and instruments for being able to measure the impact of tourism within Scotland. And one of these was an industry survey that we conducted through the Scottish Tourism Emergency Response Group, which is a group of government, public sector and industry bodies that are coordinating the recovery. And I know that Riddell as chair and Vicki as a member of that will be able to go into that in more detail. But the survey that we conducted showed that despite the fact that there were a number of businesses that were saying that they had worse trading, quite understandably, during 2020, during that July to November period when tourism could operate. Actually, there was around about half of businesses that said they were doing either better or as expected compared to previous years. And I think it was possibly biased towards maybe rural businesses or self-caterers, those sectors that seem to appeal to visitors last year. But it was a mixed picture of some businesses that were struggling, but others that seemed to do better. What was interesting was the fact that a number of businesses were taking this period of time during lockdowns and closures to reconsider what their product was and who their customer was and prepare for reopening and considering maybe if they had a focus on international markets, that they were looking to how they could adapt to a domestic market or indeed to more local markets, and certainly maybe diversify into other areas. We saw about hospitality businesses, restaurants providing takeaway facilities, things like that. But more importantly, I think, is understanding the consumer and the future traveller and what are they going to do. And since the pandemic started, in partnership with the other national tourist boards of the UK, we've conducted a regular consumer sentiment tracker. And this information is available on Visit Scotland's website, visitscotland.org. And I would recommend anybody interested in research to be able to go and get these. But what we saw was that for the intentions for 2021 were very similar to what happened in the 2020 season. Coastal and rural remain the most popular destinations, with around about a third of the population saying that they would like to go to those areas. Self-catering, caravan and camping are seen as the most popular and were the most popular accommodation types. But service accommodation is the next most popular form of accommodation, and that's vitally important for urban areas as well as the range of accommodation that is available on islands and rural destinations as well. I think what's most important and is reaffirmed with the possible rise in staycations that we're expecting is that in 2020, around about 8 in 10 of all Scottish residents took an overnight trip. And bear in mind that domestic tourism is a vitally important part of the Scottish tourism product. To see that level just highlights the importance that Scottish residents have on Scotland as a tourism destination. So what are we expecting recovery to look like? Well, as we moved from the stay at home to the stay local change in restrictions, we're looking to see that it's going to be the hyper-local audience that's going to be available for tourism businesses. And of course, that's vitally important for the day trip market. Being hyper-local, you're looking at people within your own local authority area. And for many, it could be just making simple changes to the existing product to make it appealable to the local market. As we move on and we move towards a more tiered system, we're expecting the domestic Scottish market and then rest of UK to come through. And we'll look forward to reintroducing the international markets when restrictions lift and travel both out of destination markets and into Scotland and the UK take place. So what is going to happen about the next normal? Well, I was drawn to a quote by the Chief Executive Officer of Delta Airlines, said that what they were trying to do was provide to their customers, their clients, the time to sort of get back that lost period in their lives, reclaim the lost time they had over 2020. And I think that was a fantastic way of sort of highlighting the attitude of the consumer, but also the role that tourism businesses play in that, there is a lot of time that people want to gain back after taking time in lockdown. And we talk about pent-up demand, and I think it genuinely is there. So what do we see the next normal to be? Well, for many, it could be going back to the old normal and the old ways. But I think as an industry, we want to build back better. And consumers are looking to brands and businesses to build back a brighter future so we can address some of the issues that we had in the past. So we're going to keep it simple. And I think consumers are going to stay safe with staycations and stay home, particularly as international travel might be restricted at this particular point. It's going to be about convenience, and really it's about personalization and premiumization from an industry perspective. But you can see it will be things like self-catering and service accommodation, but possibly service self-catering, working in collaboration with hospitality businesses to be able to get maybe restaurant quality food delivered to your self-catering property. And from a service accommodation, it's providing luxury so that people can feel as though they're getting that unique experience that you can only get in Scotland. I think an important part is deferred gratification, and it's about that providing inspirational content for visitors, so that part of the planning and booking process is all about building up that kind of expectation of that trip coming up. But I think the other part is traveling with purpose and acknowledging that in the past, there were issues of over tourism, and we could be facing periods with engagement with communities where we need to address anti-tourism as people sort of see the return of visitors. But working closely with communities and communicating with them and having more of a destination sense, then these can be addressed quite well. And we think volunteering is going to be an important part in providing opportunities for people to give back to a destination when they visit there. So things like rewilding or highlighting the role that local providers have in your tourism product will make sure money and input into a destination is remains. But I think the final thing and the most important part is the emotional connection that people have with tourism and holidays. I think that is a reflection of how wellness, fitness, and health are going to be an important aspect of people's holidays, because everybody enjoys holidays, everybody looks forward to them, and we mustn't underestimate the importance that it has on people's health, mental health, and well-being. So that is everything from me. I'll hand back to Bill, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. And I think it's fascinating to see that some businesses have done better than expected, and that was really good to see that, that they've come back stronger in some ways. Why do you think that is? Are they simply innovating better than others?
I think there's two parts to that. I think firstly, we did see a disparity between the cities and rural areas. And I think rural businesses certainly were a draw for many people last year. But definitely, I think many businesses have taken the opportunity during the lockdown to think about who their visitor is, who their customer is, and what their product is. And it's certainly come back with some fantastic kind of innovation that's come back. We've seen hospitality businesses, providing those takeaways, so you can get restaurant quality food. It's the collaboration that can take place between, accommodation, attractions, activity providers, and hospitality that really kind of coalesces the sense of destination that the visitor really wants to experience.
And how much, Chris, do you think tourists' needs and desires have changed in the past 13 months? Or will people just go back to what, as Delta suggests, they've been longing for in that period?
Yeah. It's quite interesting because on one hand, what we've seen is at the start of the pandemic, many people saying they don't want to go back to the old ways. They saw that, like the environment was cleaner, there was less traffic on the roads. But we're seeing today that many people, the traffic levels are actually returning back to pre-pandemic levels. So, what people have said and their behavior doesn't always sort of connect. But what we are seeing is that as an industry, we have an opportunity to build back better. And I think we need to address the issues that we saw pre-pandemic, and we acknowledge that there were issues of over-tourism, in parts of Scotland, but also in other places around the world. And as an industry, this is the opportunity to be able to build a better product that is going to sort of really appeal to the visitor, because underlying this, I think, people want something better. They want a new normal. But unfortunately, sometimes life gets in the way, and you can't always deliver on that yourself.
And I saw from your figures that 8 out of 10 residents of Scotland had taken an overnight stay in Scotland. I'd imagine that's a higher figure than before. So I wonder if in this intervening gap, when we're waiting for more foreign visitors to come back, there's encouragement that more people in Scotland will stay in Scotland this year.
Yeah, I think what we've got is we've got quite a diverse mix of attitudes towards travel, not only within Scotland, but more broadly within the UK. We had people who were shielding and quite sort of nervous about traveling. We also had people who were quite confident about travel as well. I think with the rollout of the vaccine scheme, we're seeing fewer and fewer people who are kind of nervous about traveling and being a lot more confident about wanting to do that. So whilst we wait for the international markets to be able to come back, I think that there will be more people looking towards Scotland because they know what they're going to get. Like they understand the product. There's no issues about trying to interpret different rules and regulations. And of course, having that connection with your tourism provider, your accommodation provider or activities provider, they can tell you exactly what's the situation is going to be. So I think, we're optimistic for the summer, and I think Scottish residents are certainly very passionate about Scotland as a destination.
Well, thanks for that. In the meantime, Chris, please stay on the call. You're going to be part of the panel discussion in the last quarter of the programme. I'd like to introduce now, though, Vicki Miller, who's Director of Marketing for Visit Scotland. Like Chris, Vicki and I spoke last spring on a webinar like this, when the whole strategy for the year ahead had to change, and change quickly. Well, the virus stubbornly hung around, and here we are more than a year later. So where are we with marketing visits to Scotland? Vicki, I'm sure you're keen to answer that question in detail.
Absolutely, Bill, and thank you very much, and good to see everybody today. So what I would like to do is just spend 10 minutes cantering through really our strategic approach to planning for a sustainable recovery. And I'll talk a little bit about actually some of the campaigns that we have in market currently, both domestically and internationally, and then talk about what next. And then, Bill, I think you and I can have a discussion about how everyone can be involved in what we're doing. So I want to really start with our marketing objectives. What is it we are trying to achieve with our recovery activity? First and foremost, help Scottish tourism recovery as quickly as possible and in a responsible way. And I think we've already talked about the importance of responsible this morning. But what do I mean by responsible? I mean it's going to be really important that we get a balance of visitors across the year and across Scotland. It's also going to be really important that we encourage people to, however, behave in a responsible way. We've seen a real growth in visitors enjoying the countryside, but we now understand that there is a need to educate really around what is responsible countryside behaviour, so that we see people respecting, protecting, and therefore enjoying their holiday in Scotland. And that's going to be really important in terms of building community confidence as we start to welcome visitors back. But responsible also means focusing on value. I think value of visits over volume. We want to, from a domestic market perspective, maintain and grow our share of the domestic market. I think Chris has already mentioned this morning how important the domestic market is to us. So through our marketing activity, we want to get to those people that are in the market to travel, that are confident to travel. And we've done a lot of work to segment the domestic market to understand who those COVID confident segments are, but also to get to those audiences that are yet undecided about where they are going to go in the UK for their holiday this summer. And we want to get Scotland in front of them, which is why we wanted to get out very early with campaign activity across the domestic market. Internationally, it's going to be really important that we continue to keep Scotland top of mind, increase awareness and consideration of Scotland. And ideally, we would like to see the value of international visitors back within Scotland within 2 years. Now, that obviously is a little bit out with our control, but if we get a fair wind, and obviously, you know, we from a health perspective, the virus is under control. Let's hope that that's actually what we can achieve. And it will be really important that we position Scotland as a safe, warm, welcoming destination and really show the diversity of what Scotland has got to offer across our regions and our sectors. So that's what we're trying to achieve. If I turn to now markets, now, I think, as Chris has said, it's really important that we get a balance for a sustainable recovery of both domestic and international. Domestic, really important for year round, but actually international, really important in terms of value. So we know that we're going to have to monitor things like vaccination rollout programme in all of our key markets, the infection rate, the return of important direct access routes. It's suggested that the government may go with a traffic light system, and so monitoring the countries that will be on a green list will be really important, and then looking at the economic and social factors in each country. So these are all the kind of critical indicators that we will need to monitor, and we need to be both strategic and tactical. And what do I mean by that? Strategic in terms of across all of these core markets that you see here that are important to Scotland, that we are keeping Scotland top of mind, so that when international travel certainly does resume, people are thinking about a holiday to Scotland. We've inspired them to put Scotland on their shortlist, but we also need to be tactical in terms of driving response bookings as markets start to open up. Now, we segment our markets in terms of their importance to Scotland. Core markets tend to deliver year-round tourism and really good geographic spread. The USA, North America, is very important in terms of delivering value, high spending visitors. And these important development markets are ones that we cannot forget. Even now, we've got to keep Scotland top of mind in those markets because they will be they have real potential for long-term growth and again, delivering high value visitors. So what we need to ensure is that our marketing investment is aligned to the scale of opportunity and also to those early markets that will return and recover first. A number of other building blocks, 6 that I believe are really, really important to sustainable recovery. That all important brand building all year round, building consumer confidence through inspiring but also practical information about how you can have a safe holiday in Scotland, driving performance as markets open up, investment particularly around countryside infrastructure, which we've identified as really important. And we've got a real, we've made great strides there through things like the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund. And there is more work being done in that area to ensure that we will have the right infrastructure to allow people to enjoy the countryside responsibly. And it will also be about messaging all of that with visitors. Collaboration is going to be really key to a sustainable recovery, working together, and then of course leveraging partners that can help us extend our reach very effectively and efficiently. What will also be important is that we're ever present in the customer journey so that we are discoverable in all of our key markets through the customer journey. And what you see here is the planning framework that we use, which is Google's framework, See, Think, Plan, Do, Care. And it's about ensuring that we have investment at each stage of the journey in the channels that visitors are using so that we get both awareness, consideration, and those all important bookings. Positioning Scotland, and I think Chris has already touched on some of this, really telling the stories about how Scotland can deliver on those emotional drivers for travel that Chris referred to. All of the things that people are looking for in a holiday, and we'll do that through our Only in Scotland proposition. So those are the kind of real foundations for what will be important to deliver sustainable recovery and growth. What are we currently doing? So in Scotland, we are running a responsible tourism campaign, and it's about inspiring Scots, first and foremost, to keep Scotland special. So to protect protect Scotland now and for future generations. So there's some inspirational content as part of this campaign using multiple channels, but there's also some very targeted and poignant tactical messaging, which is about really facing into some of the challenges that we saw last summer and encouraging people to do the right thing, move on if it's busy, keeping dogs on leads, picking up litter. So we're using a number of channels to reach a breadth of audiences. So for example, using influencers to reach younger audiences, but a mixture of radio, digital, and actually with a lot of support from Scottish partners, for example, transport partners who are sharing some of this content too with their audiences. So that lays the foundation for that responsible recovery. Across the UK, we're running an inspiration campaign to put Scotland within everybody's consideration set for a holiday this summer. And that campaign started back in mid-March, and it's about reaching those COVID confident segments and those undecideds using a very targeted approach. So digital media channels first and foremost, but also a number of publishing partnerships that will give us a breadth of storytelling platforms, and also partners like TripAdvisor and Expedia that can help us drive interest in product and also, very importantly, bookings. So a multi-channel UK campaign underway. There will be a second phase of this campaign later in the year. And you can see there, we will create new content around some very specific themes to promote the diversity of the types of holidays you can have in Scotland. So city breaks, days out, short stays, family holidays, and those all important kind of wellness type holidays that we know are going to be really important. And that will also focus on season extension. So we'll cover autumn and winter breaks too. In Europe, we had a campaign running in January with our Brand Scotland partners, promoting Scotland as a place to live, visit, work, study and invest. And building on that, we ran a campaign throughout March to really inspire visitors to consider Scotland for a future holiday when the time is right. It was primarily using video and targeted digital channels. And actually, to date, the results are 12 million views of the video that we've shared, and really good brand recognition and uplift coming through from the 5 markets that this campaign was live in. And in North America, very similar approach to Europe, largely a digital campaign, but really capitalizing, I guess, on the interests of the American market around things like Outlander, Men in Kilts. And of course, we had a wealth of activity around Scotland Week earlier this month, and that campaign continues through the summer. So what next, really just to conclude, we will, again, as Chris pointed out, the opportunity for promoting local stays and trips among Scots when things open up. We will have our premier travel trade event later this month, bringing 400 buyers to meet with industry. We will then have a second phase of our domestic campaign, and then we will be working to develop the initiatives that we've had funding with from Scottish Government. So maybe people on the call will be aware of an announcement earlier this, I think it was in the end of March, where 25 million has been identified by Scottish Government for 10 new recovery initiatives. Visit Scotland is leading on 6 of those, and 4 of those are really focused around demand building, both domestically and internationally. So we're working hard to make sure that we're ready to launch these as soon as we can. And Bill, I will pause there and
thank you,
hand
Vicky.
back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky, for sharing that just now. I'm aware we've got an issue with the web chat that people were wanting to ask some questions on this morning. So we're looking for a workaround on that. If we've got a solution, I will let you know by the end of the programme, and failing that, there will be a forum by which you can submit questions after this, and the team at Visit Scotland will answer them for you. Now, Vicki, what can people really do to capitalise on all that marketing work that you've been doing in the last few months?
I think, Bill, first and foremost is make sure you're taking advantage of your listing on VisitScotland.com. Make sure it's up to date. Make sure that you have signed up to the Good to Go scheme, because that, we know, will give reassurance to visitors around what you're doing to ensure a safe holiday. If you sign up to the Good to Go scheme, you can also use the Safe Travels designator, which has been launched by the World Travel and Tourism Council. And I think that will be really important as we start to welcome international visitors back, again, providing that real reassurance. And then I think the other thing is, look, what we know is that when we generate interest in Scotland, people will then go to Google and then they start to plan, or they go to online travel platforms, booking platforms to start booking. So make sure you're optimizing your online presence so that you are also discoverable. And as people start to plan their holiday, will find your business, whether it's on a third-party site. Obviously, we want direct booking, so make sure you optimize your own website. And of course, take advantage of the free listing on VisitScotland.com.
And of course, we touched on it, but France and Germany have been very badly hit during this pandemic and have gone back the way in recent weeks. So there's going to be a big gap to be plugged there. Are you optimistic that the staycationers, that visitors from England, when allowed to do so, will plug that gap to a certain extent?
I mean, absolutely. The UK market is going to be really important. I'm not ruling out the return of international travel at some point this year. Forever, maybe the optimist in me, but I'm not ruling it out. But what is important is that we do leverage both the Scottish residents and also the UK market, which is why we're really putting significant emphasis this year on UK activity. Now, that's not to the exclusion of international, because I think, as I said, we've got to be strategic and think about the long term and ensure that actually, international visitors have got Scotland as part of the first place that they want to visit when they can travel. But yeah, domestic is going to be very important to us.
Clearly, part of the marketing strategy has been come to Scotland. There's lots of open space. It's calm, it's relaxing. But of course, there'll be local residents who are concerned that that's all going to change if your campaign is successful. So how do you strike that balance? Sometimes we wonder if the government is listening more to local residents than it is to the tourism industry. How do you manage to get that seesaw in equilibrium?
So I think as an organisation, and I'm sure maybe Riddell will touch on this as well, we've been doing a lot of working with communities so that we can make sure that we are promoting each community at the right time and promoting the things that are important to any particular destination or sector. So reflecting what's important that we promote and encouraging people to think about not just the usual, get off the beaten track and do things, and promoting the diversity of what Scotland has got to offer. And I think while we've seen that real interest in countryside, we also have fantastic urban and city locations that also, provide great experiences for being outdoors. So through the marketing, we will ensure that we're promoting the things that are less obvious, encouraging that real geographic spread, but also and really highlighting, what a great experience you can have in city and urban locations where you can also be safe and be outdoors. But the work, as I say, that Riddell's team are doing is really ensuring and informing our marketing to make sure that we get the right product and experiences in front of visitors at the time that's right for each community. And that's going to be really important.
Well, thanks, Vicki. That would be an appropriate time to hand over to Riddell Graham, who's chair of the Scottish Tourism Emergency Response Group, better known as STERG. And Riddell, STERG has had its work cut out over the past year or so. So take us through, if you would, what you've been doing and how you see the immediate future, please.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And I suppose one thing to say from the word go is that the very fact that STERG exists is a very positive thing. That's an amalgam of the public sector agencies and Scottish Tourism Alliance working with the Scottish Government to coordinate the response from the tourism industry to this dreadful pandemic. And it's good to see a few of my colleagues from STERG on the call. Basically, a lot of the work has been about listening to the industry and making sure that their requirements, their concerns in relation to funding, in relation to support, are fed to the appropriate parts of government so that we can get targeted responses. Lobbying government on a whole range of issues. The creation of a single joined up action plan has been really important across all the agencies to ensure overlap and duplication is minimized. And Vicki's touched on it, developing, excuse me, phase 1 of the tourism recovery plan, and the great announcement 2 or 3 weeks ago by the First Minister around the 25 million that has been put into that to help the industry recover. And of course, over 100 million announced before Christmas in terms of direct support funds for different industry sectors. And basically ensuring that the concerns of the industry are heard loud and clear and are shared within the appropriate decision-making parts of government.
Now, we've talked a lot about how Visit Scotland's changed its role in the last year. I believe more than 200 of your staff have been helping to distribute funding that's come from central and Scottish government. How's that all gone? And have you managed to hand out whatever money is available?
Yeah, I think it is important to stress that as a core part of our business, it's not something that we've been used to. Our Event Scotland guys are probably at the forefront of that. But the organisation, I think, has stepped up really well. I think one of the great advantages of developing the funds has been they've been developed in partnership with the industry. So self-catering fund developed with ASSC, the Visitor Attraction Fund with ASVA, Coach Fund with CPT. So that's been a real strength to identify where the funding is needed most and what kind of criteria should be in place. We've been delivering over 20 different funds since May last year, total value of about 83 million. And we've paid out over 50 million of that already. And there are 2 or 3 funds just nearing completion. The biggest one, the International Tour Operators Fund, which is just about to complete in the next couple of weeks. So we've benefited over 4,500 businesses, but I think the biggest engagement has been with sector and destination organisations who've also benefited, and that then in turn benefits individual businesses.
I should just point out at this point, Riddell, that we've had an issue with the web chat, but as an alternative, if anybody wishes to ask a question, could you email business communications, just as you'd expect it spelled out, businesscommunications@visitscotland.com. That's business communications, all one word, at visitscotland.com. If we can get any of these into the end of the panel discussion, we'll do so. Failing that, the team will answer them in full on the visitscotland.org website. So what further support can Visit Scotland offer to tourism in opening up then, Riddell?
Yeah, and it's interesting because the one word that I have heard consistently over the past 4 or 5 weeks from industry, no surprise, as soon as the roadmap out of lockdown was announced, was clarity. And we've been asked to try and get clarity on the revised tourism and hospitality guidelines, travel within Scotland, and obviously the big issue there with the islands being excluded apparently early on, travel from Scotland into England, clarity in terms of the number of people who can stay in self-catering accommodation and hostels, the 2 metre, 1 metre issue in relation to visitor attractions, and then a whole range of very detailed requests. When can tour guide training start? Can alcohol be consumed after a visit to a distillery? What about vaccine passports? What about cruise and sailing? Relaxation of planning permission for camping, which would help a lot with the visitor management piece. Hospitality top-ups and support for new businesses. And from a Visit Scotland point of view, what are we allowed to do and say as we sit right now in the middle of Purda and Scottish Government are not enabled in many ways to make decisions that we would like them to make. So a whole range of issues, but it's all around that one single word about clarity. And just to reassure everybody on the call, our inbox has been inundated, as has Scottish Tourism Alliance, and we've been feeding all of these concerns in. In terms of what we can do, then obviously continued lobbying through STERG on all of those issues, communication of any announcements to the industry, listening to and responding to very specific inquiries from business, providing advice and support on a one-to-one basis. Vicki's already mentioned VisitScotland.org. If people have not, on this call, have not looked at VisitScotland.org, it is absolutely superb as a source of really important information. Touched on Scotland Reconnect, Vicki mentioned that. We've waived for the second year in a row the quality assurance fees. And I was on a call first thing this morning with all our staff from the Information Centre Network. Delighted to say they are all reopening on the 26th of April. And they are going to be a key source of advice and support, not just for visitors, but for industry as well. And just to re-emphasize, and I'm kind of, suppose, a broken record here, but if people on this call don't have an entry on VisitScotland.com, I need to ask why, because it's free. And if they've got an entry, when was the last time they updated it? Because I suspect some of the information will relate way back to 2019. The Good to Go scheme, 7,600 businesses already on it. And we've got a great relationship with Business Gateway in terms of digital boost, over 1,000 businesses benefiting from that. And then finally, in the lead up to COP26, the big responsible tourism message, which is going to be even more important, not just this year, but in the future. Vicki talked quite rightly about value as opposed to volume, and I think that has to be the way ahead for Scottish tourism.
So Riddell, if I were sitting running a hotel in Arran, or the Isle of Harris distillery, or a business in Orkney, I'd be saying, what about the islands? So what can you tell us about the islands? They seem to have been left out of the roadmap altogether.
Yeah, and Bill, you're absolutely dead right. Our inbox has been inundated with pleas and concerns from every island community around the country. The fact that they feel that with the announcement, there's been a disenfranchisement of the island communities. And we've been, I can assure you, on every STERG call since the roadmap was first announced, that has been at the top of the list, asking government to try and get some kind of clarity. Now, I don't have an answer specifically, but I am led to believe that there could be an announcement even as early as today in terms of the future, in terms of that particular issue. And I'm very hopeful that all of Scotland will open up together rather than the islands being discounted from that process. I can't say much more because I've not heard myself, but we've had an indication that there could well be some kind of announcement, and fingers crossed it will be positive news, because speaking to the Outer Hebrides guys last week, £1 million a week being lost from bookings that are being lost because of that uncertainty. And that really is totally unacceptable, and something that we have tried to make sure that the tourism message, in amongst all the other community concerns and the clinical concerns, is heard loud and clear.
Thanks. In the meantime, Riddell, I'm going to invite Chris and Vicki back on to take part in the discussion. We are getting some emails now which are asking some questions. Mark in the Cairn Gorms is saying, we talk a lot about over tourism, but this language is damaging. We need to talk about managing tourism. I'm wondering, Vicki, if there's anything you're doing in your messaging that is managing to get the right positivity across in that tone.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris actually touched on this, and over-tourism was something that we were talking about in 2019 before COVID hit. And actually, we only had an issue. It was very seasonal, particular time of the year. In actual fact, there's capacity across Scotland for visitors year-round. And across the breadth of the country, there was a few hotspots where we had an issue. So absolutely, that's why we're focused on that regional and geographic spread and promoting the breadth and diversity of what Scotland is offering. And I think through the work that we're doing with our visitor management, I chair the marketing and comms group. And from a visitor management group, we're very focused on making sure that actually it's just about getting the right message out there about being responsible. And if it's busy, move on, because actually it's a better experience for you. And it also means that you're not putting pressure on a particular place at any one time if it is busy. So I think we are working really well with all our colleagues across all the different organisations that are involved in visitor management to ensure that it's positive messaging, but it's just encouraging people to be responsible.
Thanks, Vicki. One, I believe, Riddell, for you, the FM mentioned tourism vouchers for the public to help extend the tourist or staycation season. Do you have any more information on that? Yeah,
my colleague Vicki will answer that. It sits very neatly with her, actually. I've got to say that all the projects that we put forward, along with our colleagues in the 3 enterprise agencies and Skills Development Scotland, local authorities, have had traction and I've got support from that 25 million. But this is a baby that Vicki has been developing, and she can answer that one very, very clearly.
This sounds like Eat Out to Dine Out Mark II. What is it really? Just explain it, would you, Vicki?
Yeah, yes, it's very similar. I think what we've identified is that, as we are, focused very much on the domestic market, we know that actually domestic visitors will maybe spend less in visiting attractions, particularly some of our cultural attractions in the cities. They may not take advantage of, a day tour. Tends to be more our international visitors that spend with their tour operators and in our cultural attractions. So we, in consultation with the industry, identify really the opportunity to incentivise Scots to really do more, spend more, really go out and enjoy what we've got to offer, on your doorstep, but also across Scotland when travel opens up. So it will be about incentivising, providing a discount to Scottish residents to encourage them to spend money with all of our attractions, activity operators and our tour operators. And really hopefully enriching their experience of Scotland as well. So we're working through the detail bill at the moment around the actual mechanic. We can't announce anything until after Purda. So we're working hard in the background at the moment so that we're ready to launch it. We also have a social tourism initiative, which will do something very similar, which will encourage, which will allow people who maybe are disadvantaged, wouldn't otherwise get a holiday, to actually be able to enjoy a holiday and stay over and visit all the places that they wouldn't otherwise get to. So that's one of the other initiatives.
Thanks, Vicki. Here's a very specific question, and I think, Riddell, it plays into this whole issue of clarity, and that is from Nikki. She says, is the 26th of April a confirmed date for self-catering to open to welcome all guests in Scotland, or just within Perth and Kinross, which is clearly where she is? How many households can stay in one property? Do you have a specific answer on that, Riddell?
We're working on the assumption that what has been already announced will actually happen on that date. Now, that could be the wrong assumption, but certainly all the runes that we're working to suggest that is going to be the day when announcements that were made tentatively several weeks ago actually happen in practice. In terms of number of people that can stay in self-catering, our understanding is that from the 17th of May, two sets of families can meet together in self-catering. But again, that could change. And certainly in terms of travel around Scotland, we're hopeful that that announcement will be made that will link to the 26th of April. Unfortunately, I can't be any clearer than that because we're in the hands of the Scottish Government in terms of the decision making. But again, it is on the list, and as soon as we're in a position to communicate that, we will do so. We've been at pains to stress that government need to learn from last year, and making an announcement on a Monday on the assumption that everything's going to be open and ready on a Wednesday just doesn't work. And we need at least 2 weeks, lead-in time to enable businesses to get ready and operate in an effective way. Now, I think part of that message is getting through, but we're still waiting to get, and I've used the word again, my wife hates hearing it every day, clarity in terms of all these things. And as soon as we've got them, we'll make sure it goes out to industry.
Okay, well, here's another very specific question, and I believe it sums up in some ways the frustration that people feel. It's from the Lamlash Bay Hotel from Meg there. And what she's saying is we've got bookings coming in from abroad for the summer and beyond. Should we even be taking them yet? It's not clear. They're risky bookings, as we could easily fill the rooms with Scottish bookings, but also we don't want to put people off. So what's the advice there? Who'd like to answer that one?
That's a really difficult one. I mean, my advice initially would be, if you're able to fill the accommodation with guaranteed business, i.e. from Scotland, then that has to be the priority, because I sympathize. My son lives in Denver in Colorado. He's been on the email nearly every other day saying, "Dad, when can I come and visit? I've had my first vaccine. My second one is due in a couple of weeks' time. I'm ready to come." But right now he would have to quarantine. So, I mean, I think if it's a decision between taking a domestic visitor and being sure that you can take that, then I would go for that. I don't have a crystal ball, I'm afraid. Maybe Chris has, in terms of when that might change in terms of international visitation, but that is still very much, I think, further down the line. And so for immediate bookings, I would focus on the domestic market and Scotland.
And that seems to be echoed by Andrew and Diane Nicholson from Tour the Scottish Highlands. They've got the same sort of issue here, Riddell, that most of their bookings come from abroad and they're really loath to put people off. I suppose it's the long-term damage as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a reputational issue. I mean, the last thing that we want to put out in terms of a message is that you're not welcome to Scotland. Of course, that's not the case. As Vicki's quite rightly said, we want to keep Scotland front of mind, and when it is safe to do so, to encourage visitors to come. But there are so many other hurdles in the way in terms of flights, in terms of the vaccine, in terms of the quarantine, that are out with our control. But as soon as it's safe for us to do the promotion, and as Vicki said, convert that interest into bookings. I've got to believe, from all the research we've done, there is a huge demand for Scotland. You mentioned Scotland Reconnect. We've already got over 300 buyers from all over the world wanting to learn more about what Scotland has to offer. So the demand is there. Is just how we convert that into the actual booking.
Dave Smythe, one of the first people on the call today, from Perthshire Tourism Partnership, is saying, I feel we're ignoring the data, not dates approach. Riddell's call for clarity is welcome. 26th of April seems late, but even so, can we get the border open on the 26th? That's vital. And by that, I believe he means the Scotland-England border. Any clarity on that? Welcome.
Yeah.
Riddell?
Yeah, I'm very, very conscious of that, because where I'm sitting right now is about probably 10 miles away from the border. So I'm very conscious. And equally, as has been said so many times, the vaccine doesn't care about borders. And the virus doesn't care about borders. It's about travel and being sensible. I'm really hopeful, but again, I can't be clear that the announcement will cover travel from England to Scotland, Scotland to England, because as Chris has already articulated very clearly, one of our most important markets by a mile is England. And a lot of the people on this call will be able to relate to that because of the business they get. So that is absolutely crucial, that we get clarity in terms of where people can travel, and equally that England into Scotland. And again, as Vicki's already said, ever the optimist, I'm really hopeful that that is the announcement that will be made as well. I just hope that we don't get into the Wales situation where they actually said don't come, because that would be disastrous from my point of view. I really think we need to just open everything up and manage the impact that that has.
Brigeen Mullen is a visitor centre manager. She's saying all industry bodies have been looking for the 2-metre rule for visitor attractions to be reduced to 1 metre. What data is being used in Scotland by the government to justify keeping 2 metres? We as a business cannot reopen with a 2-metre rule in place. It's just not viable. So any word on that?
Yeah, that's a really good one. Gordon from the Association of Scotland's Visitor Attractions, we meet the sector groups every fortnight, and he raised a real anomaly, which I hadn't picked up. You can have a situation where in a cafe within a visitor attraction, you can be 1 metre apart, but you can't actually have a 1 metre distance as you're travelling through the visitor attraction. That seems to me pretty ludicrous, to be honest. And that's been raised directly with government. The one slight chink we've got there is that we're trying to set up a meeting with ASVA and the clinicians to explain the unintended consequence of that particular ruling. And that last caller is not the only person that's saying, look, this is unworkable. And of course, the example is being used with supermarkets who seem to be open and are not controlling the number of visitors going through there. So I think, to me, again, I understand the data and the clinical concerns, but it is also about common sense. And all the visitor attractions that we've been working with have got mitigating actions in place. They're following all the right kind of guidelines. So I think this is about trust and about making sure that they are good to go and will manage visitors and visitor flow in the correct way.
I'm going to squeeze one more question in. It starts by talking about Sterg, but Chris, I believe it may be for you, because Gavin Syme, GLS Media, would like to know, is there any further detail about trends in the area about suppliers' perspective? In other words, do the solutions match the visitor survey information? For example, are we misaligned between what they're planning and what the visitor indicates they want? I wonder if that's one for you, Chris.
Yeah, so one of the things that we provided for Sterg was some scenario planning. Just to provide you with some very brief background to the context of where I'm going with this. And the scenarios were to provide to be able to stress test the recovery plans. What we've done is we've taken those scenarios and we've built a toolkit for tourism businesses on the back of what we did for Sterg. And we've done multiple workshops with various sectors where we've done a SWOT analysis, looking at strengths and weaknesses, and then got the workshops to see how you can minimize the weaknesses and threats with the strengths and opportunities that provided. And we're going to produce those. So there's broadcast webinars that are available to watch on VisitScotland.org website. And we're also going to be providing, alongside the toolkit, which I would recommend businesses download, which helps develop your business plan and kind of strategy for recovery. So to answer the question, yeah, we've got the industry survey that highlighted the issues that were being raised by businesses, but we've also got several sectors, including attractions, self-caterers, holiday parks, bed and breakfasts, and activity providers, a list of their recommendations of how to respond to different scenarios. So, reopening with restrictions, tiered responses, and things like that. So, there's a wealth of information that some businesses will be able to access there that might be able to answer that question.
Thanks for that, Chris, and to Vicki Miller and to Riddell Graham for the presentations and for taking your questions today. Of course, there are still many unanswered questions, so the team at Visit Scotland will now be working their way through the emailed questions and putting them on the VisitScotland.org website by the end of the week. A reminder, if you want to send in a question, it's business communications, all one word, at visitscotland.com, business communications at visitscotland.com. Now, a recording of this webinar will also be available to view again, or for those who missed it live. It's just left for me to wish everybody all the very best over the coming weeks and months, and for an uninterrupted season. I aim to sample as much Scottish hospitality as I can this year with my wife and with some of my family. So I look forward to seeing you all in person when I come to your area, when allowed to do so. From me, Bill McFarlane, thanks for watching, and bye for now.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.